Welcome to the Fantasy Football Spudcast, Season 2, Episode 2. Draft Strategies and Tips. Wow. Wow. This is a deep subject. Before we get started, my name is SirPotato TV, Joshua Hervey. You can follow me on Twitter at Twitter /SirPotato TV. Thank you once again, Red Room, for that raid. For those of you who know, this is a live show. I will be reposting this show onto YouTube as well as Spotify. And we will be talking about draft strategies and tips. And before this show tonight, I was very greatly appreciated where I was invited to go rank teams by the Spot Podcast, by the way, which if you are not supporting the Spot Podcast, I would highly recommend you go support them. That being said, we're going to move on. The Fantasy Football Spudcast, Episode 2, Draft Strategies and Tips. I'm sorry that this is a little bit later than it should be. Some of you have drafted already, so I'm hoping to help you guys. If your drafts are later this weekend, this upcoming week, a lot of people draft all the way up until the night before the Thursday night football game. So this is still going to help a lot of you if you still have drafts. So thank you so much for supporting me. Let's get on to the first tip. Strategy tip number 1. This is a vague tip. Do your research. And what I mean by do your research, stay up to date on news. Target players with volume and opportunity and draft players on good teams. That is a general rule of thumb. And doing your research, it can mean a lot of things too. There's a lot more than just that. Really, the research part of things is just... Yo, thank you so much for that subscription, Tomato Blaster. Thank you so much. Doing your research is something that you should do prior to your draft. Staying up to date on news is something that is very important, especially when you're getting into in-season as well. But this is I'm talking about doing your research before your draft, understanding who's out, who's in. I have been in bar leagues before. Where people will not do their research and they'll just bring in a ESPN top 300 cheat sheet and they'll draft players who have torn their ACL during training camp. And everybody laughs at those people 100% in the league. So, make sure you stay up to date on news. Target players with volume and opportunity. Understand target opportunity and volume. For instance, Najee Harris last year was a rookie. He went to the Steelers. If you understand that Mike Tomlin used one back, he is getting volume. He got volume, and he might not necessarily be efficient with that volume, but he got the volume. He got the targets. He was a top 10 running back last year in fantasy football leagues because of that. A target opportunity. So something we look at when we're talking about target opportunity is target displacements. So, for instance, the Packers, they lost Devontae Adams. There is all of his targets missing. They got to go somewhere on the team. Somebody is going to get the touchdown. Somebody has got to get the yards. Someone's going to have to catch the ball. Kansas City. Those are the two biggest teams right now with the largest displacement for receivers. Like, who knows what's going to happen? So just understanding, I guess, news and understanding, players on different teams, understanding coaching changes, understanding um, anything like if it's a new coaching staff, they're gonna have a different scheme than the previous regime. So just stay up to date on the news, target players with opportunity and volume, and worst case scenario, guys, just draft players on good teams. Um, that's just in general. Like, know what team is good. Go out there and do your research. Are the Bucks gonna be good again this year? We all know it. The high-powered offenses, Josh Allen and the Bills. We're talking about the Bengals. We're talking about I think the Ravens are a good offense. I mean, we're talking some of these teams out here. The Packers used to be, but are they gonna be? The Chiefs were, and are they gonna be? Like, any team in the AFC West is gonna be the Broncos, the Chargers, the Raiders. Like, these are good offenses. The Vikings have a good offense. So you want to target players on good teams. So you want to understand that too. On to the next strategy and tip number 2. Create your map. This might sound very, very, very... A map. It gives you direction on where to go. All right, so this is what you want to do. You want to rank players into tiers. This is good in any draft, snake draft, auction draft. Understanding that player A is not so different from player B. So this year we have, if you have the first overall pick, Jonathan Taylor and CMC. They're a tier by themselves in running backs. They're by themselves. If you had the first pick, you can't go wrong with drafting either or. Do you want to play it safe? Do you want to play it risky? Wide receivers, the same way. If you have a range of players in a tier and you get to that point to where you haven't got one of those guys yet and you want somebody in that tier, then you better get them the next time you're up. So ranking players in the tiers helps you because it's not necessarily that you might not be going by ADP, or average draft position is what ADP stands for. You're going by a range. So don't be scared when you're tiering players to put somebody into a tier if you believe they have that upside. And it also allows you to go down to one of the draft players you like in tiers. So Antonio Gibson might be in the same tier as somebody else, but Antonio Gibson's getting a lot of hate right now, and you might want that somebody else instead of Antonio Gibson. So it just helps you when you're drafting. It's not necessarily like the right tool or etc. The other thing to do is to know your site's rankings and settings. So know your site's rankings. So if you have the opportunity to, every site has different rankings. Yahoo is different from ESPN, which is different from NFL.com, which is different from CBS, which is different from RT Sports and all these other sites. Every site has their own rankings. So know the rankings of the site to see maybe who might fall at a value to you. So when I'm talking about falling at a value, I'm talking about when you tier these players, you're going to have these players in tiers. Maybe on one site, a player is going in the 3rd or 4th round, whereas one site, if you do mock drafts, you're going in the 5th or 6th round. So you got to know that. Like, it's value when you draft a player. It's just a value knowing that it helps you. If you know a player on one site is going in the 5th and 6th round, and that same player on another site is moved up in the rankings, then maybe you don't want to draft him that high. So knowing your site's rankings and knowing your league settings. We talked about knowing your league settings last year, how important it is to know your league settings, knowing who you're gonna draft and what type of players you need on your team. For instance, like I said last week, if you're in a standard scoring league where you don't get any extra points for receptions, you're going to want people that are going to find their nose for the end zone. Guys like Damian Harris, who found the end zone a lot. James Conner. Guys with, maybe volume is something you target in a standard scoring league. Guys like J.D. McKissick, James Cook, these pass-catching backs that don't do a whole lot. Naheem Hines. Guys like that, they don't have a lot of value in standard leagues. So you got to move those players down. Receivers, they don't have a lot of value. Like in standard leagues, running backs are going to be pushed up, especially the ones that are bell cow backs are going to get pushed up. So that's why you have to know your settings. Strategy tip number 3, when in doubt, draft talent. And when I mean draft talent, I'm talking about go for the guy that is just better. Don't always play it safe when drafting. So, what I mean by this, in draft volatility and high-risk players. So, what I'm talking about and understanding values. So, let me just put it this way. When I talk about safe players versus high-risk players, I am talking about, I brought this up already. CMC and Jonathan Taylor. I see the argument for a high-risk CMC player because CMC averages actually more fantasy points than Jonathan Taylor per game when he's on the field. CMC averages 26.7 PPR fantasy points per game compared to Jonathan Taylor's 23 or 24 per game. I can't remember the exact number, but it's a 2-point difference when they're on the field. But there's risk with CMC. CMC has been injured the last couple of years. He's had some hamstring issues. So that's a riskier player. Saquon Barkley. He is going in the second. He's been hurt. He is supposedly healthy. He's a high-risk player. But he's a player that has done it. He has done it before in the past. He has been the number 1 overall running back in the past. He is a high-risk player. He can do that. He's done it before. He's falling somewhere towards the end of the second round. Maybe Aaron Jones. Maybe it's Aaron Jones versus Saquon Barkley to you. And you don't know who. Aaron Jones is a safe play. I mean, he's going to have a bit of a ceiling, Aaron Jones, but he's going to be safe. He's going to catch the ball. He's going to make up in catches. So I guess the question here is, would you rather have a guy that has number 1 overall potential, or would you have a guy that's capped? It's all up to you, risky. And volatility. So it really makes a difference when you're in the mid to late rounds too, because that could make or break your season. Funny, we were talking a little bit about this when I was grading the drafts, the draft results in this league that I analyzed. One of the teams had some players on the team that didn't have a very high ceiling. So in the mid to late rounds, you want to draft players with upside and not so much a low ceiling. Let's talk about Adam Thielen versus Kadarius Toney. For instance, Adam Thielen has done it every year, but he is capped. I understand he's on a good offense. I told you to draft players on good offenses. He's been hurt. He's 32 years old. Receivers decline after the age of 30. So is he going to continue to decline? He came out and said he's healthier than ever. Is that true? Is that fact? Is that fiction? Who knows? Can he fall in the end zone for 10 touchdowns? Probably. But a guy like Kadarius Toney, who on a very short game sample last year was an elite talent. So putting a guy like Toney on your team, if he blows up and you put him into your starting lineup, whereas Adam Thielen will never blow up to the point that Kadarius Toney did. He might get you 15 fantasy points a week, but he's not going to get you 25 or 30 a week. So that being said, who do you want on your bench? Players that have upside on your team are risky, especially since most of these guys you're putting on your team too aren't going to be in your starting lineup. They're going to be your wide receiver 4, your running back 3s and 4s. There's like, they aren't your starting lineup. So if you can get a player like that, you can trade them, or you could trade a different player, or you can just keep them on your bench as depth, or swap them out and put the player that's scoring the less. Let's just basically understand. So basically, drafting higher risk players with high ceilings is really what I'm trying to get at, as opposed to drafting older guys. So Ezekiel Elliott versus Travis Etienne. That's a common one that's been coming around. Ezekiel Elliott was good, but he has not been the same for 2 years. I understand he dealt with a PCL injury last year, but he has not been good the last couple of years. He's never finished outside the top 12 running backs, but he's never going to be an overall number 1 running back again. That is just out of the question. So are you drafting Saquon Barkley or Ezekiel Elliott? Are you going to draft... I guess that's a question for you and for you to figure out. Understanding values. This goes back to tiers and volatility and understanding values. Now, when I say understanding values, just because a player's value is dropped doesn't mean you can't draft that player at a certain value. For instance, Antonio Gibson, I think at the beginning of the year, was being drafted in the 4th or 5th round. He has fallen to about the 5th, 6th round in most 12-team leagues now. He might fall to the 7th. If he comes back to you in the 7th round, he is very talented. He got the volume workload last year. Why not take the guy? You might not like the guy. You might not really care for him, but it's a value. And if he doesn't pan out for somebody that's going to be on your bench or a flex, it's not that big of a deal, because they're going to be drafting more players, A, with higher upside, or B, with... And I understand Antonio Gibson's always going to be capped. They're never going to use him in the pass-catching game. But at the same time, he got 300 touches last year. I don't believe in Carson Wentz on the team. Carson Wentz is an upgrade to Heineke, yes. But I don't believe Carson Wentz is make or break for this Washington football team. Antonio Gibson is going to carry the rock. Maybe it's less. Maybe it's more. Will he be injured this year? Who knows? Is he going to play through that injury? Who knows? But Antonio Gibson is the name that comes to mind. Snake draft tips. Here we go. This is what most of you will be drafting, is in a snake draft, especially if you're new to fantasy football and you're listening to the show. If you know your draft position, do mock drafts to understand what your team could look like. If you know what your draft position is, do mock drafts. This is so you know which players are going to fall to you, or you could maybe understand where players are going to fall to you and see, and just try some different things. Draft a quarterback early and see what your team looks like. Draft a tight end early and see what it's going to look like. Draft running back early and see what your team is. Draft wide receiver and figure out which team you like best. If you're in the same league with owners from the past, remember how certain positions or players are valued. If you're in a new league, keep track of when certain positions or players are taken for the next year. How essentially, some leagues, you keep the same people in the leagues. You essentially are going to know, hey, this guy likes to draft quarterbacks early. Which means I might get a guy coming back to me that shouldn't be there because, A, this guy likes to draft quarterbacks early. This guy likes to draft tight ends early. I might get my guy. And then obviously, tonight, I was told that somebody drafted kickers and defenses early. That's great. If you know these guys like to draft kickers and defenses early, way earlier than they should be, that means you're getting value. Good for you. That is great. Don't be scared to reach a round or two to get players you like. Let's be real. Once you're in the late to mid rounds, it's players to fill the end of your roster or bench spots. So this is kind of going back to drafting high-risk, high-ceiling players at the end of your bench. As opposed to, obviously, if you're a Vikings fan and you want Adam Thielen on your team, go ahead and draft your guy. Go ahead. If you like Adam Thielen, draft Adam Thielen. But I wouldn't reach for a guy like Adam Thielen. If you don't believe in Adam Thielen and you like KJ Osborne, you're like, you know what? I believe in KJ Osborne. Let's go get KJ Osborne instead. Let's reach for him at the end of the draft. Let's get him. But no, if you are in a league with a bunch of people who are very knowledgeable about fantasy football, and you know that player A is not going to make it back to you, go get that player before. Who cares? If you think this guy is going to break out, go get that player before. Let's just be honest. You're going to get, after the first 4 or 5 rounds, it's honestly a crapshoot what you're going to play at flex. You can play a lot of different people at flex. It's going to change throughout the year. Plus, there's going to be injuries. Plus, there's going to be other players that come out, that break out, that aren't even on your roster. So go ahead, reach a round or two. Go for it. Understand values of players. Just because you don't like a player, if a player falls that is talented, don't be scared to draft them. This is kind of like I was bringing up before. Antonio Gibson is falling. If Antonio Gibson falls past the 6th round, it is a huge value. If he falls to the 7th or 8th round, maybe he fumbles again in the second preseason game, and people are like, oh, nope, I'm done with him. I'm done with Antonio Gibson. He's off my list. I don't think a player should ever be off your list. Let's just be real here. That's why I'm saying understanding values of players. If you let an owner draft Antonio Gibson in the 8th round because everybody else is like, I don't want to touch this guy with a 10-foot pole, that is absolute steal. It doesn't matter how good he is. You can't fail at the 8th or 9th round. It's a bench spot. It's a bench spot, chat. It is a bench spot. You can't fail. Auction draft tips. This is something I do. Um, so I talked about making a map earlier. Um, when you're in an auction, a lot of people don't know exactly what they're doing. And the first time I did an auction, I had zero idea what the heck was going on. I had no clue how to budget. I had no clue how to do that. So, in my opinion, the best way to do auction drafts is to make several different plans and have backup plans. So, let's say you tiered you made a rankings and you tiered your players. Now the sites will have values on players and what they should or shouldn't go for, usually. And this is when I was talking about know your league settings and go into your mock draft and see what are these players actually worth on the site. This is something else you need to think about when you're doing your research. Understanding what are these guys going for on average in fantasy leagues and what should they be going for. So, it's easier to get value in auction drafts than it is, I believe, in snake drafts, by the way. Because you're going to be, let's just face it, in auction drafts, you're going to get a lot of the people to spend top dollar, we'll just say like the top 2 rounds of the draft. So if you're in a snake draft, anybody taken in the first 24 picks is most likely going to be a top dollar player, which means a lot of the money is going to come off. That means when you get down to the middle rounds, there's a lot of these guys where people are going to stop spending money. And you're going to get guys like Michael Pittman cheap, who is a breakout player, Cortland Sutton cheap, Travis Etienne cheap. And then people eventually, towards the end of the draft, you're going to get a bunch of $1 players. You're going to get a bunch of $1 players to fill the end of your roster. Guys like Brian Robinson, the handcuff to Antonio Gibson. Just to let you know that right now. You're going to get guys like Dameon Pierce. Might be a buck at the end of the draft. Like all these guys, those are all value, especially if Dameon Pierce is a starter. A starting running back for $1 at the end of your draft. I'm not saying that's going to happen in your auction draft, but I'm just saying, like, if that for some reason slips through the crack and nobody knows that, then it's a great value. So understand your budget throughout the draft and know how many roster spots you need to fill. So, in an auction draft, you have to fill your roster. You can't spend all your money on 2 players. There's a cap. So if you have 15 bench spots and you have a $200 budget, fake dollars, $200 budget, you can't spend $100 on Christian McCaffrey and $100 on Jonathan Taylor. I'm done. I don't need that. You can't draft any more players. You got $0. But you can't do that in an auction draft because you need 15 more spots. So you could do $100 on Christian McCaffrey, and so you need 14 spots left, which means you need $14 left. So you have $14 left. So you have $100 left. You draft another player, you need at least $13. So you need $87. You can go 87 on Christian McCaffrey. That just means everybody else on your team has got to be $1. And if somebody bids you up, you're out of it. Have fun building your lineup. You can have both those guys, but I'm not saying Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor are $100. I'm just saying, giving you an example. And you need to understand values even more in auction drafts. This is kind of what I was hinting at before, where you're going to get people that are going to bid a bunch of money early on. You might have 1 or 2 people that kind of lay low, Like, you know what? I don't want to go after the top guys. I'm going to go for like the mid tier guys. And then there's going to be a point to where there's going to be guys going cheaper than they should be going for. And that's why you need to know the values of the players. And that is it for the draft strategies and tips. Those are the main tips that I can give you for drafting. It's a short show tonight. Next week, we will talk about a little bit about the news, the preseason camps, some of the training camp battles, some notes, some things. I forgot to change my overlay, but I'm sorry. We're learning here, chat. We're learning here, people. Next time, it'll be fixed. So, that being said, thank you so much for showing up tonight. Thank you for the raid. Thank you for the subscriptions. Thanks for all the support, guys. I appreciate everything you guys do for me. I will try to give you the best fantasy football advice I can throughout the year. For those of you who did not make it live on Friday nights at 11:30 p.m. at 11 p.m. Central Standard Time on Friday, you can watch this on Saturday mornings or late Saturday nights. Mostly the morning, probably because I don't usually get done uploading the video to YouTube or Spotify, the audio, until early a.m. But it will be available to you by Saturday morning when you wake up. That being said, if you don't have my YouTube or Spotify, there is a link in my chat right now. It is YouTube Potato Sports and Gaming. Potato Sports and Gaming. Protaton. Oh, sorry. Potato Sports and Gaming. Protato Sportsn Gaming. Just YouTube search that, and then it is the Fantasy Football Spudcast on Spotify. And you guys have a great night. Thank you for stopping by.